In the heart of a busy city, there lived an old man named Mr. Thompson. He was known by everyone in his neighborhood as a quiet, gentle soul who spent his days tending to a small garden outside his apartment building. His life was simple, and though he didn't have much, he always found ways to help others. Whether it was offering a listening ear to someone in distress or sharing the vegetables from his garden, Mr. Thompson believed in the power of kindness. One chilly autumn morning, as Mr. Thompson was preparing to plant tulip bulbs for the spring, he noticed a young woman sitting on the steps of his building, shivering in the cold. She was clutching a thin jacket round herself, her eyes red from crying. Concerned, Mr. Thompson approached her. "Are you all right, dear?" he asked softly. The young woman looked up, startled by the kindness in his voice. I am fine," she stammered. But it was clear she was anything but fine. Mr. Thompson didn't press her for details. Instead, he removed his own warm scarf and gently draped it over her shoulders. "Here, this will keep you warm. Why don't you come inside for a cup of tea? It's too cold to be out here." After a moment of hesitation, the young woman nodded and followed Mr. Thompson into his small, cozy apartment. He led her to the kitchen, where the smell of freshly brewed tea filled the air. He poured her a cup and sat down across from her at the table. They sat in silence for a while, the warmth of the tea and the calm presence of Mr. Thompson easing some of the tension in the young woman's face. Finally, she spoke. "My name is Emily," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. I've had a rough few days. I lost my job, and I've been struggling to pay rent. I don't have any family nearby, and I just didn't know where to go." Mr. Thompson listened quietly, his heart aching for her. He remembered what it felt like to be young and overwhelmed by life's challenges. He had been there himself once, many years ago. "You know, Emily," he said after a pause, "sometimes life can feel like it's falling apart. But it's in those moments that we have to hold on to the belief that things can and will get better. You're not alone in this. There are people who care, even if it doesn't always seem that way." Emily looked at him, tears welling up in her eyes. "Thank you," she said, her voice trembling. "I didn't expect kindness from a stranger. It means more than you know." From that day on, Emily and Mr. Thompson became close friends. He helped her find temporary work in the neighborhood, and she assisted him with his garden, finding comfort in the simple act of planting and nurturing the flowers. As winter turned to spring, the tulips they had planted together bloomed in vibrant colors, a testament to the power of hope and kindness. One afternoon, as they were working in the garden, a neighbor named Mrs. Rodriguez stopped by. She was an elderly woman who had lived in the building for years, but she kept to herself and was often seen as grumpy by others. However, she couldn't help but notice the beautiful garden that Mr. Thompson and Emily had created. "That's a lovely garden you have there," Mrs. Rodriguez remarked, her tone softer than usual. "Thank you, Mrs. Rodriguez." Mr. Thompson replied with a smile. "Would you like to join us? We could use some help planting these new flowers." Mrs. Rodriguez hesitated, not used to being included in such activities. But something about the warmth in Mr. Thompson's invitation made her agree. She found herself enjoying the company, and over the next few weeks, she became a regular visitor to the garden. As time passed, the small act of kindness from Mr. Thompson began to ripple through the neighborhood. Mrs. Rodriguez, inspired by the camaraderie she had found, started inviting others from the building to join them. Soon, what had started as a simple garden project blossomed into a community effort. People who had once been strangers began to connect, sharing meals, stories, and support. The garden became a gathering place, a symbol of unity and kindness in a city that often felt cold and impersonal. The elderly, the young, families, and singles all found a sense of belonging in that small patch of green. One day, as the sun set and the group gathered around a picnic table for dinner, Emily looked around at the faces of her new friends. It was hard to believe that just months ago, she had felt so alone. The kindness of one man had not only changed her life, but had also transformed an entire community. She turned to Mr. Thompson, who was quietly sipping his tea, a contented smile on his face. "Thank you," she said softly. "You've done more than you'll ever know." Mr. Thompson shook his head modestly. "It wasn't just me, Emily. Kindness is like a seed. It grows when it is nurtured by many hands." This he gestured to the garden and the people around them. "This is all of us." As the evening wore on, the laughter and conversation filled the air. The garden bathed in the warm glow of lanterns. The tulips, now fully bloomed, swayed gently in the breeze, a reminder of the beauty that can come from even the smallest acts of compassion. And so, the power of kindness continued to ripple outward, touching more lives than any of them could have imagined. The neighborhood, once a collection of individuals living separate lives, had become a true community, all because one man had taken the time to share his warmth and generosity with a stranger in need.